unfortunately you just can't produce realism with watercolor. That is not true. Hey guys, Pencil Shark here, and in this video we are going to debunk 5 common watercolor painting myths that might be preventing you from enjoying watercolor or even just trying it. Welcome to my channel, let's dive in. Myth number 1, watercolor is just for kids. It's easy to think that way because kids are introduced to watercolor out of all the mediums first. And so there's a whole bunch of kids paintings out there with watercolor. Watercolor is accessible, it's affordable, and so it's just easy to get your hands on. But just because it's accessible and affordable does not mean it should be taken less serious. There are artists who have watercolor paintings in galleries and museums all over the world. Could you afford this watercolor painting by Joseph Mallard William Turner? You could if you have $9.9 million to spend. This series of 12 landscapes by Shi was auctioned in 2017 in Beijing for $144 million. It is officially the most expensive work of Chinese art in history. So watercolor isn't just for kids, it is for professionals too. Myth number 2, watercolors look drab. Now they certainly can, and I won't argue against that. I've seen a lot of watercolors that look drab, and it makes me wonder, why are they called watercolor when there's no color in this painting? Usually they're drab like that because someone either just doesn't know that you need to put more pigment in your brush, or someone doesn't know that they're using too much water, like more water and not enough pigment. But check out the work from Richard Thorne. He uses vivid, rich colors. Look at how he puts blues in the shadows. Look at how bright those greens are. I recently did a study on how to make your watercolors look like they're popping with color. This is watercolor. This idea that all watercolors are just drab, nonsense. If you use high quality paint, you can make this happen. Also, it takes usually a few layers, not just one layer. You wanna build up that paint on the paper. Myth number 3, watercolors can't produce realism. This is one of the main reasons I avoided watercolor, because I thought, yeah, I'm into realism. I've always loved realism, but unfortunately you just can't produce realism with watercolor. That is not true. I'm gonna show you 2 of my most realistic watercolor paintings. This is the Ghoul from Fallout, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. This is my largest watercolor painting, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. Watercolor can produce realism. And check out these watercolor paintings that look so realistic by these fantastic artists. So you absolutely can create realism with watercolor. I do believe that watercolor, like all mediums, has its strengths and weaknesses. And there are some references that play better to the strengths of watercolor. If you're interested in knowing what type of references you should pick for your paintings, then leave a comment below. I can make a whole video specifically for that. Myth number 4, watercolor is so unforgiving. I had an art teacher when I was a kid tell me, avoid watercolor at all costs. It's just frustrating, you can't control it, it's unforgiving. And I listened to her and I avoided it for most of my life. I've been painting with watercolor for almost a year now, and I can tell you there is almost a fix for every mistake. What's great about that is I actually can relax while painting, knowing that, hey, if I mess up, it's no big deal. I'll learn from it and there's a fix for it. I do want to share some of those things that I have found that help. One is having masking fluid. And these are 2 different brands of masking fluid, but this helps protect your whites. Because in watercolor, if you want something to be white, you pretty much have to just protect the page from getting paint on it, and these will help with that. But let's say you put paint in an area that was supposed to remain completely white and you didn't use your masking fluid, you forgot. Well, that's where white paint really helps. And you can use gouache or you can use watercolor opaque paint, and I really like using this watercolor paint. It's so opaque, it's just as good as the gouache, and I like this because it's watercolor with watercolor. So I think there's something cool about that. There's a whole bunch of ways of fixing watercolor mistakes, and if you're interested in learning that, just let me know in the comments. Myth number 5, here we go. This is a big one. Start with the cheapest materials until you get better. You might not get better. You might give up because you are having so much frustration working with cruddy paper. It is so important to use 100% cold pressed paper. I've tried the cheap stuff and it's frustrating. It buckles too easily. You can't put lots of layers on there. When you get the high quality paper, it costs more, but if you're enjoying the process, you're less likely to give up. So let's say that you go to the store and you get yourself the cheap kind of watercolor paper, 100 pieces of paper, and you're thinking, wow, I got so many pieces of paper and it was so cheap. But if you're miserable and you give up, so what? I would rather spend the same amount and get only 15 pieces of watercolor paper that's high quality, where I'm actually enjoying the process, because I'm more likely to not give up this craft. I'm gonna get better and better, and I will see progress. Lots of brands make 100% cotton paper. These are some of my favorites. Fabriano, and that's what I did the bright watercolors on. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but if you have a store called Micheals Arts and Craft in your town, you can get their brand. And make sure that you're getting the level 3, because that's the one that's 100% cotton. There's lots of other brands out there. They're not all the same, so test them out, see which ones you like. Some people like more of a rough piece of paper, some like it more smooth. For me, I really like cold press. Now, if you don't like your paper being wrinkly at all, there's a couple fixes for that. One, you can take a sponge and wet the back side and the front side of your piece of paper, and it will lay down very flat as you paint on it. Or you don't have to use a sponge, you can just use a large paintbrush and wet both sides of the paper. So that's one fix. Another fix is Aqua boards. Aqua boards will not warp on you. I used the Aqua board for this painting, so there's no warping, and I also used the Aqua board for this painting. There are lots of options, and you just need to test out what you like. I love these boards. I also love the 100% cotton paper. But I can't stress this enough. There's a big difference between cheap watercolor products and quality watercolor products. Now, if you're interested in all the supplies I recommend, look at the description of this video, because I've made a list of the papers I recommend, the brushes and the paint, and some extra utensils I think that you'll find very helpful. The bottom line is you got to make sure you're enjoying the process, and with higher quality materials like the paper and the brushes, you're more likely to enjoy that process. Like Bob Ross said, if you're not having fun, you're done. He didn't say that, but I wish he did, because that is hilarious. Anyways, it's true too. By debunking these myths, I hope that you can attack the blank page with watercolor, enjoy the process, and thank you so much for watching. Give it a thumbs up, share it. I'll see you in the next video.